How to get long hair. I know there's a component of this that is genetic, but there are certain things that I've found, so here are 18 tips for how you can get longer hair. Tip number 1 is super simple. It's just to brush your hair gently. I noticed that people who have really long hair versus people who have short hair brush their hair significantly differently, and the reason I noticed this was actually with wigs. I was watching somebody who had shorter hair and brush the wig, and she would just trip through that thing, and just watching it made me cringe. But then I noticed people who also had really long hair were much gentler in how they brush their hair, so if you're ripping through your hair, you're breaking your hair off. Don't do that. If you're just nice to it and gently from the bottom, just kind of gradually work your way up. Yes, it takes longer. But every time you're ripping your hair and people wonder why their hair breaks off. Number 2 is another really simple one that almost sounds like it's being a little sarcastic, but it's really not. Just find yourself a hairstylist who isn't scissor happy. Some hairstylists, when you go and you're like, oh yes, I would just like a trim, and then next thing you know they chopped like 6 inches off your hair. Some people are just more prone to doing that than others. And so if you're not constantly cutting a ton off of your hair, then it's naturally going to be longer. So it sounds kind of snarky when I'm like, well, just don't cut it. I'm not saying don't cut it at all, but don't cut a ton off of it. If you can find a hairstylist who also has long hair, that might help. If she has super short hair and is always talking about how she'd like longer hair, that might be a red flag. Number 3 is probably what you've heard a million times, but it really is just avoid using heat styling on your hair as much as possible. But if you do, always use a heat protectant. I brought one here. I don't have any particular preference on brand, but this is just one. You just spray it in your hair, and it helps protect your hair from the heat, but avoid it if you can. Number 4 is avoid super tight ponytails. This isn't even so much for length, but you'll actually wind up ripping your hair out, particularly in the front when you pull it in the really tight bun or in a tight ponytail, and ripping your hair out anywhere is not good. Plus it tends to get caught in the little ponytail scrunchy thing, and then you're breaking the hair off. If you can avoid doing those and doing them in little tiny twisties, that's good. You don't want to have to cut it out of your hair. Number 5, if you're going swimming, oh my goodness, braid your hair before you go swimming. If you go, I mean, anybody, if you already have long hair, you know if you go in the water and it's not braided, it's gonna be so tangly when you get out. You don't even want to think about it, it almost gives me anxiety even thinking about it. And every time your hair gets tangled, you've got to go through it and risk breaking hairs off. So if you just put your hair into braids before you go in the swimming pool, you're gonna make your life easier and you're gonna make your hair happier and not risk breaking it off. Number 6, don't wash your hair too much. I know that sounds kind of weird and kind of gross. It used to be more gross before the advent of dry shampoo. If you wash your hair too much, you're stripping all those natural oils out of your hair, the natural oils that keep your hair all nice and not breaky. It's not good. You need those natural oils in your hair to keep your hair nice, and as much fake oils as you put in your hair, it's never quite the same as the oozy stuff that comes out of your head. That's really gross. Number 7, make sure you brush all of the tangles out of your hair before getting in the shower. It's gonna be a lot easier to do that while your hair is dry than once it gets all wet, and it gets all naughty and nasty. Plus you've got one extra chance there to move all the oils through your hair before you go in the shower and rinse it all out. That actually leads really well into number 8, which is don't brush your hair while it's wet. If you need to untangle your hair while it's wet, use a wide tooth comb or like a pick to really gently get out all the mess, because your hair actually becomes more fragile when it's wet. You just gently. Number 9 is use shampoos that are gentle. Number 10 is a say tip that involves teasing. First of all, if you can avoid at least severely teasing your hair like crazy teasing, that, and honestly probably avoid teasing it at all if you can, but if you do have a time where it's severely teased, I've had times when it was severely teased. I used to model, and one time what am I gonna do? I literally couldn't get a brush through it, and that's a scary thing for a person with really long hair. What you do to get that out is just take a bottle of conditioner and coat your head in it, and once your head's totally coated in conditioner, you can comb it out. And still tedious, but in case somebody does that, don't fear, my long-haired friends, who've had your hair severely teased. You can get it out, but seriously just coat it in conditioner, because if you just try and brush through that, You're gonna wind up breaking your hair. Conditioner's your friend. Number 11 is let the conditioner soak into your hair while you are showering for at least 5 minutes. Number 12 almost seems a little counterintuitive or a little bit contradictory to number 2, but number 12 is actually you do need to trim your hair. Trim the ends. Find yourself a hairstylist who can trim it for you. I probably really need a trim, and I literally take a tiny little pair of scissors, and if I see a split end like down here somewhere I'll just cut it off. Like look. There's one. You can't sit there and individually snip off all the ends of your hairs, but if you happen to see one, number 13 is something that was actually a tip that's for your skin. And that's sleeping with a silk pillowcase. And the thing is, it's not only nicer on your skin and doesn't pull on your skin as much, but I've found it doesn't pull on your hair and tangle your hair up as much, so your hair is more intact in the morning, and that means less brushing in the morning and less tangles and less ripping your hair out. Number 14, don't drive with the windows all down in your car unless your hair is in a braid or secured some way, because it's just gonna tangle your hair so much. The wind's gonna blow it every which way and you're creating all these knots in it, and then you're gonna have to sometimes literally can't get them out. It gets so bad. Braiding your hair, or at least putting it into a ponytail, though not a super duper tight one. These tips I've read from information source are good for your hair that might be good for you to try. 2. Number 15 is different hair masks and treatments that you can leave in your hair. Number 17 is actually avoiding coloring your hair or bleaching your hair as much as possible. If really long hair and you're struggling and you can't, then don't bleach it, because bleach is really hard on your hair. Bleach is hard on everything. I mean, you can clean your toilet with it. Why are we putting it in our hair? Color. I think some people have this idea that coloring your hair is not bad for it, but from what I've read, it can cause damage to your hair, too. There might be some brands that do that less than others, and like some advertise, oh, it's good for your hair. I don't know if that's true or not, but if you have avoided it altogether, you know what? You're probably more likely to be able to get your hair to grow really long. Number 18 is hair vitamins. Number 18 is just one I read that says that every night before bed you should brush through your hair to distribute the oils, and that actually makes a lot of sense, and that's one that I might start doing. Plus, you go to bed with fewer tangles, and it's probably gonna get less tangly as the night goes on, kind of similar to brushing through your hair before you get in the shower to eliminate those tangles. If you keep the tangles from getting too bad in the first place, then, I don't know, you're just preventing it from getting worse and worse and worse to the point where you're breaking your hairs to try and get it untangly. I think the overall gist of this was avoid the heats, avoid the harsh products, and do things you can to avoid getting your hair super tangly where you're in those situations where you're tempted to brush through really hard and wind up breaking your hair.